Hello and welcome to Deep Impact, a proud member of the Duff Network where we dive deep into Wildbow's most reflective work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And before we start today, let's just do a little quick special announcement, which is that the regular Duff fan art contest, which is usually reserved for Parahumans exclusive fan art. I know, who cares about that? No, it's always pretty good. But this time the theme that they've gone with is reflections, isn't it? Reflection?
Yes, it's reflections. And so obviously Pact is included in it this time. So we talked about this at the end of last episode, but we know some of you are very rude and don't listen to our outros.
Shame on you.
So, we're just putting it at the front here. So, if you have that Pact itch and you want to draw something out, and it has something to do with reflections, please enter the fan art contest.
Yes. How do they do that, Elliot?
You've got to email your submissions to, I believe it's doofmedia@gmail.com.
Correct.
There'll be a link in the show notes to like the page that's all about the competition, and all the details will be there as well, in case I've missed anything.
Saying there's a link in the show notes is the equivalent of, I can't quite remember it right now, but I'll definitely remember it later.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm going for.
Yes, I would love to see some Parahumans fan art. Try and keep it...
You mean Pact?
Sorry, yes, Pact.
Or have you betrayed
I've
us already?
been a traitor this whole time. I'm the Rose of this fan art contest. No, yeah, I'd love to see some Pact fan art. Try and keep it, relatively spoiler-free of all the stuff that happens from 11 onwards, but that's fine.
I mean, yeah, I'd prefer it if it was something that I can appreciate too, but I'll get there eventually either way, I guess.
Yeah. All right, should we dive into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so Malfeasance 11.1 starts with Blake trapped in the mirror with nothing to do but scream.
Whew. I mean, he doesn't scream for that long though, because even screaming damages his vocal cords, and we all know what damage of any kind does to him these days. This whole opening bit is exactly sort of what you'd expect from Blake being trapped, which is he hates it, and all of his internal narration and his struggle is about the fact that he can't do anything. Like, I really like how in character that is for him, that it's not just like he's not just bemoaning the fact that he's trapped, but like Wildbow specifically points that anger and that frustration in the fact that there's nothing he can do about it.
There's no release. Yeah,
it's very Blake.
Yeah, and this is an interesting chapter, right? Because at least in the first half, not that much happens, but Blake does a few really interesting things, and I quite like this chapter for that reason. One of the things he does is he starts examining his tattoo birds a bit more. And the first thing we notice of them, or he notices of them, is that they're also screaming along with him, which is so weird, and it's such a perfect way to set up the thing of like, the birds are going to be doing some weird shit this chapter, get on board.
Yeah, I mean, and because, we've obviously become very familiar with the fact that he has spirits in him over the last arc and a half, and I feel like now we're starting to explore what that means for them as much as what it means for Blake. Like, why are they screaming? Is this an empathetic thing? Or are they just as upset? It would make sense if they're the sorts of spirits that were attracted to Blake and are feeding Blake's energy, that they would be the sorts of spirits who would be upset at being trapped. But, I don't know. I think I forget how much intelligence and agency some spirits seem to have. Like, it's a bit of a spectrum from the seams of it.
Yeah, and that's something we really explore this chapter, right? Is how alive these things actually are, I guess.
Because we've been told, I think, very early on that they sort of have the intelligence of animals, and I think I'd sort of started to forget that they were anything more than simple patterns, but, now we're starting to explore a bit more that there's some depth to them. Yeah.
Here's an interesting line. Blake is dwelling on all the shitty stuff that's happening to right now, and he thinks, it gnawed at me. Where it gnawed at me, I changed. The branches finding just a little bit more ground. And it's so weird. This is such a weird bit because it kind of, like, things gnaw at him emotionally, but that also has a physical effect and a physical location and physical damage onto him, which is bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, we saw last arc that there were some emotional things that caused him physical changes. But this is fantastic prose that really makes that stand out. Like, this is a very clever line. to turn like gnawing emotion, which is a common phrase, into like literal gnawing. It's so packed. It's brilliant. Like I loved this line.
It is very packed, isn't it? And another line that I want to pull out that I really liked is when Blake is looking at his bird tattoos, he notices that some looked more like sketches than real birds. Their eyes just circles with shaky lines circling them a few times, which means some of these spirits are like badly drawn tattoos, which who knows what that means, but it can't be good, right? It's so weird.
Yeah, I feel like it'll be significant, but I have no idea what to do with it right now. Like, are they fake mirror world spirits? Is that why they're bad drawings, or are they? Is it representative of something to do with them or his relationship with them? Yeah, it's such a cool little seed of a mystery that's just been planted at the start of this arc.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Blake has to give up on screaming because he's going to hurt his throat and he doesn't want his throat to be taken over. But he's not able to sit still. So to kind of keep himself from going insane, he starts talking to his bird tattoos and like interacting with them and testing how they work.
Yeah, and he names one Lefty, and I'm all about Lefty right now.
Lefty's the new Evan, huh?
Yeah, move over, Evan. No, actually, I want them both. I want Lefty and Evan interaction scenes. This whole thing is great because it's kind of Blake talking to himself, but of course, right now, himself isn't just himself.
Yeah.
So it's a great sort of way to have him, talk things over and do a bit of self-reflection.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? Like, it kind of feels like Blake's losing the plot a bit while because it is the pact equivalent of talking to yourself, right? I love the way you phrase that because that's kind of what we're seeing here. And that obviously isn't a great sign outside of Pact. And I feel like it's also not a great sign inside of Pact. It still feels like off.
Yeah, well, and so I don't know if it's just something I've taken away from this and I'm focusing on it, or if it's something the arc might explore, but like for me, the way Blake starts interacting with these spirits sort of got something that's in the back of my mind sort of ramping up, which is like wondering how exactly what spirits are possessing people for, like why are they in there? Because I was just sort of talking about how some of them are actually fairly intelligent, and like we've seen that seemingly the term spirit applies to like a wide like gamut of things, not like kind of like goblin.
Yeah,
like we get spirits like this frog one from the previous interlude that was like manifesting as a puddle or whatever. Like that seems to be like an individual powerful thing as opposed to the spirits that are apparently just sort of in the background of stuff that practitioners manipulate with runes. So there's like this whole spectrum of spirits and different ones seem to be attracted to different people, and I wonder if we're sort of maybe going to explore a bit of that and what that means. Like why have these ones been attracted to Blake? What does that mean for him? What does it mean for them?
Yeah, I definitely kind of have been of the opinion that the spirits that are inside Blake are more on the weak kind of background radiation side, right? But we don't really know that. Like, especially in these interactions with Lefty, it feels like this particular spirit, Lefty, or, all of the spirits in Blake really could be way more powerful than we actually realize.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least like thought about. And it comes back to that thing. Why do they do this? Like, is it just an instinct thing? Like, are they just sort of filling a void, or, like I guess I'm just interested to see if maybe there's more to it. I mean, we talked last chapter, like as Andy was theorizing, like what practitioners might be doing to the universe that attracts others, and maybe it's something to do with spirits. Like maybe humans and particularly practitioners have some sort of unique interaction, like they empower spirits, or they attract spirits, and if they attract the spirits, then the others probably follow, right?
Yeah.
So like I don't know. It just seems like this is sort of something that the story is starting to talk about, and I'm super interested to see where it might go.
Yeah, definitely. It does feel like we're starting to actually explore what do spirits tangibly mean for Blake and for this universe, which is fun.
Yeah, and of course, I love that those two things are coming together at the same time. Like it doesn't have to feel like it's shoehorned in the explanation of spirits because in the story it's been worked into Blake's journey, so it's a very relevant. Like that's good plotting.
Yeah, yeah. So another line I want to pull out is Blake thinking to himself, I haven't changed quite enough to see if my emotions or mindset change, which is just wrong. Yep, good work, Blake. Well, I mean, I guess he hasn't changed enough to see if he's changing, but we definitely have noticed him changing.
Yeah, you're right. That's an interpretation that I guess the spirits took because he isn't forsworn right now. So, I mean, if Lefty had called him straight out on this, I would have been like, yeah, fair call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Come on, Blake. Are you serious? So one line I wanted to pull out from this section while we're just sort of taking turns pulling out lines is Blake sort of thinks, or I think he says this to Lefty. He says, if Rose is telling the truth and she doesn't have conquest as an excuse to do what she's doing, then that makes me 10 times as pissed off. And it also means that doing anything to her is off the table. And I thought this was interesting because given where Arc 10 started off and everything, if Blake was feeling murderous tendencies towards Rose, I wouldn't have been shocked, right? Like,
yeah.
So yeah. I'm very interested by this fact that he is very clearly still drawing this line and saying that he's not going to do anything too serious to her. Which I mean, like, good on him. Like, I'm like, props to him. I think that's a very noble thing to do. But I mean, I'm part of me, the tinfoil part of me can't help but wonder if there's like a self-preservation thing in there. If I'm right about them being cut in half, or still being connected and still being two halves of the same whole, or two parts of a whole, or something. Maybe there's something that stops them from actively working against each other. It would explain some things.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about that is it's highly possible that whatever is keeping them from not acting against each other was dampened by him being in the abyss, and what we interpreted as him kind of coming back around to Rose is actually him just existing more in the real world over the course of Arc 10, and therefore kind of having to not act against her as much.
Yeah, I didn't trace it close enough, but I'd be interested to try and see if there was a bit of a turning point when Faisal gave Blake the the self boost,
interesting,
the self affirmation, as it were. But yeah, I agree. There was a definite tendency towards. There was a definite trend as Blake became more his old self and started falling into his old patterns. He also became less anti-Rose, and like maybe there's something else to that. Maybe there's not. I mean, he's just a good person who doesn't like killing people. So, I guess we'll see. But it's interesting either way.
Yeah. Here's a fun little thing to pick out. When Blake is looking at Lefty, he kind of thinks, man, I'm glad I picked birds for my tattoos because it kind of suits what I'm doing now, and the fact that they've come to life is kind of cool. And he's kind of reflecting on what the worst thing he could have picked for this is. He actually calls out specifically a pastel-coloured bug with a symbol on its back, which I don't know if that's a reference or not, but it reminded me of that like Love Bug TV show that was mentioned in Worm.
Yeah, I had the same thought.
I don't know if that's an intentional reference or something. But I'm kind of curious what you think the worst thing he could have picked for a tattoo would have been. I would have loved the idea of like Blake getting a bunch of Marvel superheroes tattooed on himself as like chibi Marvel superheroes, and now the spirits are like Superman and Iron Man just running around on his body. That would be fun.
I mean, like, lots of people in real life have little, like, devil or demon tattoos. That probably wouldn't have been ideal.
Yeah, it could have been like one of those like thorn wraps around your upper arm.
Yeah. Oh, that wouldn't have been good at all. I mean, it's interesting that he's a little bit worried about what he picked as tattoos, considering what he knows about himself now. But
yeah, true.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just realised. Sorry, I was about to read out the next bit of my notes, but I've realised that I've completely botched this reference. So never mind. I was talking about something that isn't even from Worm; it's from The Expanse. So never mind.
Okay, I don't know what you're talking about here. So the next thing that happens in this chapter is Evan and Ty come in to talk to Blake to keep him company.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I love this whole scene. It's fantastic. But like, I wanted to talk about why we think it's Ty, because I mean, obviously Evan had to be one of the two. Like, if two people had to come and visit Blake, Evan had to be one of them because they're BFFs for life. I mean, they both swore an oath saying that. But like, I like Ty as the choice for this because like Alexis is too much, and I think comes with Like, this is a relatively sort of relaxed chapter from this point on. And I think Alexis comes with too much emotional weight. And so does Tiffany in a way, but she also didn't really have that much with Blake, whereas like Ty and him are just sort of friends. And it's good to sort of use that as just a level field to kind of approach this more relaxed, character-driven scene.
They have a simpler, kind of uncomplicated friendship, right?
Yeah.
I love Evan so much. He's so great in this chapter. It's so good to have him back. When they come in, Blake points out that Tyler kind of looks like a pirate, and Evan's response is something like, "I'd say Evan want a cracker, but I don't, so I won't." Which is just great. He's just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say it now so I don't have to pull out every other line in the rest of this chapter, but there's so much good stuff, particularly from Evan. I was very proud of Evan. Like, that's actually a very clever and practitioner-y way around saying the joke that you want to say. Like, good on him for being a 7-year-old and being smart enough to think of that. Because, like, I'm pretty convinced if I was suddenly bound to speak the truth, I'd fuck it up within 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, totally. I definitely would fuck it up all the time.
Yeah, so like I'm very impressed by Evan. Like, I think something that we probably don't talk about enough while Evan's being adorable is like he's pretty fucking smart.
He's well adjusted to this as well, isn't he? Like, he's kind of taken it all in stride pretty well.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I guess he and Blake relate on that front, but I'm very impressed. Like, I'm constantly impressed by how smart. Like, he's a very quick and observant person for a 7-year-old, even a dead one.
Yeah,
especially a dead one. I mean,
yeah. Now here's an interesting beat. Up until Tyler walks in and says that it's 4:30 in the morning, this chapter feels like it's continued maybe half an hour after the last chapter. I mean, we've just had Blake have to stop screaming, which seems like the first thing that he did because he was going to hurt his throat, and presumably that wouldn't take that long for him to realize. But suddenly it's 4:30 in the morning. Like, it feels like, I mean, I don't know what time the last chapter happened, but it kind of feels like there's some weird time shenanigans going on. And I don't know what to make of it.
Well, I mean, Blake mentions a couple of times that if he stops thinking to have his heartbeat and to breathe, he can just not, and then he loses huge tracts of time. Like, he mentions it towards the end of the chapter as well. So I think this is just him and us getting to realize that is actually something he's been doing, and it's a bit of a problem. And I think it really interestingly recontextualizes how things like Barbatorum can be happy to just sit in a circle for 50 years. Because it's not just that, like, with immortality, time means less to them. It's that sort of, apparently, as an other, some types of others at least have this ability to just sort of tune out time. Like, if you're not beholden by things like, well, by mortal concerns, basically.
Yeah.
You can just chill there for hours and hours and not even notice that it was hours.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. I think that makes sense. I don't know what we're meant to take from that, though. I mean, are we meant to take from that Blake is, I don't know. It feels like beats like that have to be setting up Blake's transition deeper into otherness, which I don't know. Yeah. I don't want to embrace.
No, I do think so. Although it's interesting that he is constantly fighting it. Like, I think given the situation he's in and how awful it is, like, my strategy probably would have been to be like, okay, cool, I'm going to check out until I notice something. Which, like, I think he maybe mostly did accidentally. But, like, it'd be very easy to succumb to it. But he is kind of fighting it when he notices that he's doing it.
Yeah.
Also, of course, metaphorically, he's conquered time, so he's going to conquer the Bahams,
Yeah.
I'm not reading too much into this. You're not reading enough into it.
Yeah, okay. All right, buddy. So they're kind of having this a bit awkward conversation, and so Ty pulls out a deck of cards, and they kind of start playing poker as a way to pass time and hang out without having to navigate some pretty awkward conversation traps.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much here that I would, like, again, I'm just going to have to not pull anything out because otherwise I'll pull the whole thing out. Like, Ty and Blake are having this sort of adult conversation where Ty's filling him in on the big things that he's missed, and Evan's chiming in with, like, funny little comments that help stop it feeling serious as it's going.
Yeah.
And then I love Evan's little conversation about the condescending looks that adults will sometimes do that they think kids don't notice, but at least Evan does.
Yeah.
I just love this whole sort of segment of the chapter and how relaxed it is as our introduction to the arc.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a nice way. It's a kind of nice, relaxed way of us taking a bit of a breather after what happened, but also kind of giving us info on what actually Blake's situation is here, because we really don't know where everyone sits in relation to him, right? I mean, we kind of know what Rose thinks about him, but I mean, maybe not even. I mean, and it's nice to get a bit of that perspective through Ty here.
I think what's also interesting is there's a lot of talk here about the fact that Blake is struggling. Like, while he is trapped here, it's really not good for him at all.
Yeah.
Like, he's slowly being worn down. He's like, oh, I need something to keep myself sustained. And since the drain still has a hold on him, part of that is going to be he needs to be a spooky monster. But we've seen so many times in this story that just being with his friends and being himself recharges him a bit. And I can't help but feel that that's what this scene does. And Blake doesn't seem to notice it, but I definitely feel that it would have.
Or it doesn't, and the absence of that is an important point for us to take going forward.
That's true, actually. I guess we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. I've been working off the assumption it did, but you're right. The other way is just as significant.
Yeah. So Blake thinks he wins a hand with a 3 of a kind, and immediately I thought that this is hinting he needs to recruit the 3 triplets from the mirror dimension to help him beat Rose, but apparently that's not what I was meant to take from it. Apparently we're meant to take from it that he wins with 3 of a kind, and that reminds him of the rule of 3s, and he might be able to use that for some benefit, which is a cool little way of working that into the story.
Yeah, I agree. I like how smooth that transition is. I also like that Wildbow did feel the need to explain it, because I did not make that connection myself until it was explicitly made clear. So, I think that shows like a good understanding of what we are and aren't going to get. Like, once the connection was made, I was like, oh yes, I see the logical steps Blake took, but I'm glad that I wasn't expected to take them, because I don't think I would have.
Yeah, it's a cool little train of thought, isn't it? So this becomes Blake's plan now. He kind of recruits Evan to help him. Evan throws a few games so that Blake can potentially beat Ty 3 times, and then once he's done that, he might be able to kind of ask a favor of him without him being able to refuse it to gain some power over him. But this
it's a very good idea.
It's a great plan, but it doesn't work because Blake is so terrible at card games. It's hilarious because Ty doesn't know about this plan. He doesn't know that he's up to something. But Blake is just getting thwarted by himself being terrible at card games. It's great.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because presumably, maybe this is an overly optimistic take, but he's still human enough that he has tells, unlike Evan.
Yeah.
And so maybe that was a factor.
Yeah. Interesting.
I might just be like grasping at straws
here. It's an optimistic read.
Yeah.
So yeah, Blake's plan really doesn't work. Evan loses enough that he's out of money. Evan has to fold so many times that he's out of money, which means Ty kind of realizes that something's up. And before it can all kind of come out, Rose enters, and from that point on, it's obvious that no plots are going to go ahead here.
Yeah. And so at this point, I want to quickly jump in with something that I was sort of thinking about. Because Blake talks a lot about, in this chapter, like one of the things he ruminates on with Lefty and some other times is how easily memories from before his creation slips in. And his current working theory that he talks about with Ty here is that, like, somebody else was dragged into it. A real person was converted into him and sort of merged with Rose.
Yeah.
Which is, like, similar to the idea I've sort of been talking about, really. It's just, has an extra victim, which means it's probably likely because that's more suffering. But, they tie it into the whole thing, like, demons and sort of diabolists by proxy don't create. So it would make sense that this whole structure is about changing. Or I think even changing to me doesn't make sense. Like, diabolists and demons, they're about taking and destroying. And so, like, this idea of, like, fracturing something in half, like, if a person was torn in half, I think that's even more on brand than somebody else sort of being sacrificed and merged in.
Mm.
So it got me wondering if, like, the humanity, because Blake talks a lot about how Rose is the real human now and notices all these things about how she's a real human at the moment, but
Yeah.
he almost seems to have forgotten that while she was in the mirrors, the rules that apply to him now seemed to apply to her.
Yes, although potentially I think he kind of thinks that because she didn't talk to him about realizing how some of the powers worked, that she didn't have access to them. For example, what Blake does later, where he's able to kind of divorce the mirror world version of something from the real world version of it. Because Rose doesn't say anything about that ever while she's in the mirror, Blake assumes that she never really could do it, which I think is not a great assumption to make, but that's kind of where his train of thought is, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and it's so hard to... I mean, the interesting thing about Rose sort of going forward is that whole thing, because she doesn't... her memory has been altered so much of all the time we've known her before Blake fell into the abyss. It's hard to know what she does and doesn't know.
Yeah,
because so much has been shifted around. But anyway, where my mind went with this is, if it is one person who's sort of been fractured through demon shenanigans, I wonder if the humanity is something that's sort of yo-yoing between them. Because if there's only enough human for one person, basically, I'm wondering if that's something that kind of... it would make sense that that's why Rose is worried about Blake and wants to keep him trapped, because maybe he can theoretically try to tip the scales back towards himself. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting theory. Yeah. It's a weird situation, right? Because they're talking. Like, this is the first time Blake is talking to Rose since he's been banished to the mirror dimension. And it's so awkward. Like, Blake kind of has to sit there and pretend to be friendly, because he doesn't want to kind of piss off Rose and, I don't know, get put in the extra bad timeout corner or whatever it would be. It's got a weird energy.
No, absolutely. There's a very strong sense of, like, fake civility from both ends. Like, I feel like Rose is fighting conquest-based impulses / her own personality, apparently. And Blake is, as you said, trying to act like a good prisoner so he doesn't get into more trouble.
Yeah.
I like the bit where Blake compares Rose to Laird and Sandra here, because, like, I do see that. The way she talks to him, it feels very practitioner-y.
Yeah, definitely. So Ty kind of fills Rose in on what they spoke about, because Rose demands to know what they were talking about. And during this, Blake does something interesting. He zones out, and he kind of, like I said, he kind of divorces the mirror world version of some of the objects, like the deck of cards and a few books that they were using to play poker. He kind of divorces them from their real world versions, so they stay nearby him inside the circle.
So I want to make sure I understand this, because I'm not 100% sure that I understood it right. So I at the very least, I understand that I think this is the follow-up to what we talked about last arc, in that car with the Bahamas.
In the car scene, exactly.
Where things in the spirit world, or things in the mirror world, are affected by sort of how much energy Blake puts into thinking about them.
Yep.
And so this is him sort of weaponizing and using that to a bigger degree by intentionally pulling things in when he wants them to come in.
Yes.
But there's the whole bit about him sort of pushing his focus and pushing against the circle that I don't quite understand. Is that sort of him? Is he struggling more to push past the circle to pull the book and coins in because the circle's, like, naturally preventing that to some degree? Or
that was my kind of read on it, but it's not super clear, so it could be a few different things, I suppose.
As long as it's not just me being dumb, then I'm a little bit okay with it being a bit unclear. That's fine.
Yeah. I think it's intentionally a little bit vague. There's still more for Blake to explore about how his powers work here, I guess.
Yeah, but it's fun. You know, he's been in this mirror world for an arc, really, and now we're getting to see him start to, use it, and it's really cool. Yeah, no, it is cool. I don't know what he's planning to do with the stuff that he got, but it's kind of a cool way to set up, like, okay, I've got some coins, I've got half a pack of cards, I've got a book. Maybe I can put this together. I mean, it's something. Like, it's going to require like a real MacGyver situation right now, but it's something.
Yeah, it's very tricksy. I like it. Yeah, so let's talk about this bit. We've kind of touched on this bit about Blake thinking that Rose is more real than he is, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of uses that to take comfort in that to then kind of weaponize the knowledge that he thinks he has over her. But I don't know. I don't feel like it's wise to trust her to not have said anything about some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, she's clever enough not to.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, we'll see, I suppose. So this arc ends with Rose leaving behind a kind of boogeyman bodyguard in the room with the instructions to kind of make sure that Blake doesn't pull any tricks, and then leaves him kind of alone again. And Blake starts to plot out his tricks.
Yeah, and I mean, it's I can't wait to see what he's planning, what he thinks he's going to do.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming he's going to get out of the mirror world soon. I can't imagine he spends the rest of the story in here unless something changes.
Arcs.
Yeah, I mean, I also spent most of Worm expecting Brockton Bay to get better, so, like, I've been wrong before about this stuff. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly where he takes this plan, especially with the boogeyman. I was really upset when Rose said the boogeyman she left in there couldn't talk to him. I was kind of hoping for, Blake to spend some time chilling with one of his,
brothers?
Brother in arms. I don't know.
I love that we don't see this boogeyman. Like, it's left there and it can't talk. And it's like standing so that we can't see it, we can't hear it. We just know it's there. It's such a creepy thing. I love it.
Also, Rose said don't communicate with him. She didn't say don't speak with him, which even took away my thinking that they could sign at each other or something.
Yeah.
Because I was sure it was going to be Corvid. I was like, that'd be
I thought
fucking
so too.
luck.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. Like, oh yeah, of course, she's fucking sicked Corvidae on him. I mean, she might have. We don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. But I really liked this opener to the arc. Like, it's quite a sort of not like slow chapter, but just sort of very character driven and sort of just focusing on first Blake and then his relationship with Ty and Evan and yeah, I just really liked it for a sort of calm, introspective chapter to open what I presume is going to be the arc of shit-hitting fans.
Yeah, I like it too. Before we wrap up, I thought we should dive into some comments from when this chapter first came out 5 years ago and see what people are saying about the story. Elliot, do you want to start us off with your comment?
Yeah, sure. I've picked a comment by Greg, who, took a less charitable read of Lefty than I did and pointed out that since Lefty is from the left or the sinister side, maybe that's not a good sign. Which is just an interesting little connection, I thought. Mond Semel, another poster, commented right underneath that, though, that since Blake is in the mirror world, maybe Lefty's really on the right side. So it's all okay.
Fair. Yeah, it balances out. Yeah. I like the idea of the left hand, right hand stuff coming back into it, because we obviously got some of that with all the tarot stuff, but it hasn't played into the story that much. Even with the tarot stuff, it didn't feel super relevant. I'm expecting there'll be some other stuff where it comes back more. So I'd love to see that stuff.
Seemingly, its main contribution to the story so far is the fact that Blake and Rose seemingly aren't quite mirror versions of each other, and what exactly that means. That was sort of something that the witch implied when she gave that speech.
But
yeah, it is. But it'd be interesting to see if it takes a more direct sort of approach to being relevant.
Yeah.
So what have you brought?
The comment I pulled out was by M. Solomon 2. And look, so the comment they put out isn't that important. They basically said, I never really liked Rose. I wanted to like Rose, but I never could, and now I hate her more than ever. And that was a really strong theme throughout this chapter. Everyone's really on the hating Rose train, which I kind of want to talk about, because I know she is kind of being a dick at the moment, yes. But and I don't know, like, comparatively, she's not worse than the other villains. She's better than some of the other villains we've got, right? Like, she's doing better than Sandra or Duncan, I would say. She's not as good as Johannes, but nobody's as good as Johannes, so that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. In a world filled with lairds and shepherds and, other people like that, it's hard to think too little of Rose. I think obviously a lot of it comes down to the fact that she has recently, on a number of occasions, directly betrayed Blake, who thinks so highly of her, and obviously we're in his head, so it feels a lot more personal to us as well as Blake.
And I guess that's what it is. Like, people hate her because she's moving so actively against Blake, but I mean, Blake still wants to ally himself with her, right? Because she is, for example, keeping the Cabal relatively safe as they kind of could be in this situation.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of distrustful of that instinct that he has. Like, I don't want him to go around and kill her. I don't think that'd be better, but I do think it's worth questioning why he still sort of keeps trusting her so much.
Yeah.
Because she clearly doesn't deserve it. I mean, I don't hate her as much as some of the comments I saw, but I think it's fair to say that she doesn't deserve to be trusted right now.
I don't think she is... she's not really doing anything different from how she's saying she's going to treat Blake, though, right? Like, it wasn't like she said, "Oh yeah, Blake, come on in, I'll help you," and then like turned it around and backstabbed him. She's kind of consistently been like, "No, you can't be here. Like, I can't, you're not on our team. I can't deal with that." And Blake's like, no, I want to be on your team. And then Rose just kind of has to deal with it.
I mean, considering how he treated her for the large part and tried to get her involved and stuff, I can see why he would feel somewhat entitled to.
But she doesn't remember that. I mean,
no, that's true. No, you're right.
I get why people hate her, because she is being mean. She is being a big old meanie, but
she's definitely an arsehole, but I don't know if in this world that warrants like top tier level hate.
Yes, exactly.
And especially, like, I think the thing for me that has made me not hold the actions of the last Archon a bit against her quite as much has been she's always sort of been making a smart play. Like, I think I haven't been able to fully fault all the logic she's made, and that means something. Like, she's still an arsehole, but I can definitely see where she's coming from, and that allows me to empathize with her on some level.
Yeah, she seems to be making relatively smart moves for the situation that she's in.
Exactly.
Anyway, so that's what people have been talking about 5 years ago when this chapter first came out. And that's the end of our episode on Malfeasance 11.1. If you want to leave us your thoughts on how much you hate Rose, or alternatively whether she's done nothing wrong and she's great, the place to do that is in our discussion thread linked in the show notes down below.
Yes, and of course you can hit us up on Twitter and via email. That is mediamdpodcast@gmail.com and @mediamdpodcast.
Yes, and another reminder, if you want to participate in the fan art contest, head on over to doofmedia.com. You'll see all the info there. And you might also want to back us on Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yeah, because as well as getting to vote in said fan art contest, also all patrons will have received by now, by the time this episode airs, a special bonus episode that we're releasing exclusively on Patreon, covering the short story Wildbow wrote for Do the Right Thing. Yeah,
just a little fun piece of bonus content that we thought would be a fun thing to release. Accessible to any patrons from $1 a month all the way up to $100 a month. So if you want to get access to that, head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yeah, and it's a fun little episode, and I think it's, if you're willing to try it out, I think you'll get a bit of a fun taste of everything great that you get being a patron of Doof Media, because there's a lot of great perks.
Yeah, definitely. While you're on Patreon, go and check out Wildbow's Patreon as well, which is wild, but nope, that's not right. www.patreon.com/wildbow is what it is.
Yes.
Obviously he's the one who writes Pact and all the other great stuff that we talk about, so make sure you support him as well.
Yep, absolutely. These stories would not exist in the way they do right now without that Patreon.
Yeah.
And so apart from that, we'll see everyone on Monday, the 9th of September, for Malfeasance 11.2.
Bye.